This video essay series is going to be a loose philosophical and narrative analysis of the film Ghost in the Shell, the original version of course released in 1995. The main aim to come up empty-handed. The lack of, let's say, academic attention to a cult classic such as this completely baffled me, so I decided that I'll just make one of my own, because to me it seems like GITs in particular and sci-fi in general are essential tools to understand concepts such as identity because they push it to its limits, and taking identity as your first principle allows you to understand the various implications of the techno-futuristic world envisioned by most cyberpunk stories. But why is such an analysis important? Well, it's not, or rather, it's almost unnecessary, but I just really wanted to do it, so there you go. Nevertheless, in my opinion, it's not so much a question of necessity, but that the questions this genre raises about identity are so fundamental and basic that all it would take for you to have an existential crisis is just ask yourself a bunch of questions. A reading of philosophy can only be enhanced by taking it with some form of media, because that makes it tangible and its meaning accessible. But why the GITS franchise? Well, it's just simply because of information. You could point out other films like Blade Runner, Ex Machina, or Altered Carbon, but the problem with those films is that they're standalone. But Ghost in the Shell is an entire franchise in itself. It has the original Ghost in the Shell film, it has Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, 2 seasons of that, and then Ghost in the Shell Arise, which is supposed to be a prequel to Standalone Complex, 2 seasons of that. And they recently made like a remake of the original film completely in CGI, which is trash, so don't waste your time on that. In the opening scene of the original movie, we are told that the narrative is set in the not-so-distant future where corporate networks fill the earth with electronic and optical communication lines, but society has not become computerized or digitized enough to make obsolete categories such as nations and races. The entire story of the 1995 film and most of the standalone complex episodes take place in the fictional Newport City in Japan. In the first scene of the film, we see our protagonist, Motoko Kusanagi, also simply referred to as the Major by several characters, perched on top of a skyscraper listening in on a conversation happening somewhere within the building. While eavesdropping, she is contacted by her colleague in Section 9, Bato. Right away we find out that she is in fact a cyborg with a body that is heavily augmented by cybernetic implants. These implants not only allow her to access digital information without any external devices, but also allow her to control communications. At this point we are inclined to think that she has received special classified technologies because she is a government operative, but the fact is that her colleagues also possess the same technology, leads us to believe that this tech is not so special and rare that only a handful of people can have it. As the conversation between Motoko and Bato goes on, it is implied that they're about to move in on their target. But before that we have a rather funny moment where Bato observes that the Major seemingly wasn't really paying attention to him and asks what's with all the noise in her brain today, to which she nonchalantly replies, "Must be a loose wire," while literally pulling out wires from sockets attached to the nape of her neck. Maybe that's just a nerd in me, but I found that quite funny because it's a phrase that can be heard today, but in her case it is possible that there literally is a loose wire. In the next scene, the action starts and we see that the police officers as well as the private security of the targets, one of whom appears to be a diplomat and the other some sort of a programmer, use more or less traditional guns. So the whole world presented here is advanced, but not advanced enough that ballistic technology that we have today has been made obsolete. We also get another bit of world building when Aramaki, chief of Section 9 and my second favourite character of the franchise, barges in on the meeting and lets the foreign diplomat know that it's illegal to take classified programmers out of the country. So two things. First, it makes it abundantly clear the society and the government have been thoroughly inundated with technology, much more so than today, to the extent that programmers working on government projects are under the same level of protection as given to high-ranking bureaucrats. Second, due to their importance they are targets of political espionage and play an important role in diplomacy. In the middle of this interchange, Motoko jumps down from the rooftop through the window of the room and shoots the diplomat in the head with what seemed like an exploding bullet, which, as the name implies, caused the diplomat's head to explode. Due to the explosion, we see that there are wires inside his skull along with synthetic materials that look like and probably are made to function like cartilage. An interesting thing to note here is that it was a joint operation by Section 9 and Section 6. and squad members of the latter, who comprised the main attack force, were unaware of Motoko's actions and agendas. So when the diplomat was shot, presumably dead, by the Major, it's definitely surprised the people that were present there, but to me it seemed like the surprise and shock was limited to the attack itself. They almost seem to ignore the fact that an important foreign diplomat was just killed in their presence, and that this could cause major political damage to Japan's diplomatic relations. When I first saw the film, I missed this detail, but after rewatching it like 1,000 times, it struck me that this was clearly done to imply that destruction of the physical body does not actually lead to the person dying in this universe. So already in the opening segment of the film, we are introduced to the possibility that physical death, or death of the body, does not actually mean death as we know it. But it raises further questions. What about your legal status? Where do your human rights or your legal rights as a citizen of whatever country lie? In our world, rights are tied to our person, that is, to our physical body. It would be ridiculous to think that if I'm convicted of a crime, I can just change my name and suddenly I'm innocent. That's because it is not your consciousness or your mind that is answerable to the law, but your body. It's not your mind or consciousness that has rights, it's your body that has them. This is because your body is the one thing that you cannot share with anyone else. You can share your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs, but no one, at least today, can viscerally invade your body and manipulate it as their own. So this scene where the diplomat is killed and no one gives two shits about it can either be interpreted as showing the callousness of this futuristic society, or as I think, it implies that legal rights and the concept of identity is now not exclusively applied to your body. This is why I love this franchise so much, because it can say so much in such a small amount of time. Of course, it doesn't mean that this quality by itself can make a show good or worth watching, but the narrative and visually artistic skill that this series exemplifies does show that it can indeed be done. The next scene starts what is probably the most in-your-face sequence in the film, which epitomizes an impressionistic approach. We are taken through a visually stunning process of making a cybernetic body. First, we are presented with what looks like a skeleton made of metals and polymers, and with wires entangled with the kind of soft tissue that resembles natural muscles. This image is evocative in so many ways. First, it evokes the idea that this body in particular blurs the boundary between natural and artificial, biological and synthetic, the real and virtual, man and machine, and how all these dualisms are manifested and viscerally embedded in the bodies. To us, such bodies of course look fictional, but imagine what it must be like to actually live in one of them. Just try to imagine what it must be like to know that the very thing that makes you, your immediate sense of self, was created in a factory by a bunch of people or robots. All the intentions, motivations, actions of the people and institutions involved in the production of these cybernetic bodies are manifested in you. Your very sense of self is manufactured in every sense of the word. So who are you, and where exactly do you exist? The sequence then shows how various synthetic layers are attached onto the skeleton so that it will externally look like a meaty human body from an observer's perspective. Maybe this scene is trying to bring up the idea that my personality is made up of layers that are dynamic and replaceable depending on the environment that I am in. Or maybe they just wanted to show something cool, which they really did. The final scene of the sequence shows the body, which is now increasingly looking like Motoko's, rising up the water tank. Now it is out of the water tank and it clearly is Motoko. There is a lingering shot of the cyborg, and the moment we see its eyes opening, we cut to a scene of Motoko waking up in her bed. This scene is clearly saying something, but I don't exactly know what that is. It kind of feels like the simulation thesis, which, as the name suggests, has the idea that the entire universe we live in is existing inside a simulation, but that doesn't really fit. So here's what I think. When you go to sleep and wake up, there is literally no way of knowing, through a purely intellectual effort, that you are the same person from yesterday, or the aliens abducted you when you were sleeping and put a new body in your place with false memories. My memory, if analysed by itself, is unreliable. When I wake up and look around my room, I see remnants of the past. Not a distant past eons ago, but literally the day before. I see objects that I remember touching and using yesterday. I see a glass of water that I put on my bedside table for when I wake up, and all of these objects give me a sense of continuity. These objects are part of my recent history, and by looking at them, I get a sense that I was the same person that I was before I went to sleep, because these things still hold the same meaning and purpose in my mind. I get another sense. I don't realize it when I'm lying half awake in my bed, but subconsciously I know that my body is my own, that no one has lived in my body apart from myself ever since I was born, that no one has changed parts of my body because my body can only function as a whole. But what does it all mean to Motoko? She knows that her body is manufactured, that the parts necessary to give her a sense of self are literally constructed, that it is possible to create another body just like hers if the need arises. What will she do when she faces someone with the same body as hers who looks exactly like hers? I have no idea. The proposition that someone came in while we were sleeping and replaced us with a new body with false memories can be nothing but a practice in absurdity and borderline comedic. But what is absurd and ridiculous for you is very real for Motoko. It actually is entirely possible that every time she sleeps, someone comes in, takes her body, puts a cybernetic brain in the new one that looks exactly like the old one, and then puts it back in the bed. This is unlikely, but it definitely can happen in this universe. Knowing this possibility, what is she to think of herself? Who is she? If her body can literally be replaced every night, then what does it mean to be her? Is she just her body? Is it her mind that's really her? Is her mind separate from her body? But she definitely has a bodily experience every day. So am I to believe that my physical experiences have no impact on how my mind works? But that's impossible. Some stuff happens and I get angry or sad or happy. So the physical world clearly affects my mind. So my mind clearly cannot be separate from my body, which is the conduit through which the world influences me and I influence the world. So how can this happen to Motoko? Who is she, and then who am I?